Good morning. I am Rabbi Jonathan Freirich at Temple Beth Zion here in Buffalo, and I welcome you to Crossroads. Crossroads is a production of our hosting organization here at Town Square Media and the Network of Religious Communities here in Buffalo. The Network of Religious Communities is this amazing organization of denominations, congregations, and religious organizations located in and serving Western New York. We are every religion you can imagine. We are Baha'i and Buddhist, Christian of all sorts, Hindu, Jewish, multiple different types of Judaism, multiple Muslims, Sikh, and Unitarians. Together we celebrate the wonderful religious diversity of Western New York, and today I am so thrilled to be joined by it's the first time I haven't had a Jewish person on in a while. I am here with Andy Deyell, who happens to be Catholic, but I know him because he is the head of school at Elmwood Franklin School. I am also an enthusiastic Elmwood Franklin supporter, in large part because I have two kids there, but Andy is also an Elmwood Franklin parent, so our kids bracket each other. Yours are in first grade, going into
second and going into fifth.
Right, and mine are going into kindergarten and going into seventh. So we have a long time period of student life at Elmwood Franklin covered. So Andy is joining me today because we have a couple of topics on the simmer here. First of all, Andy has been kind enough to invite me in to talk about diversity and stuff at Elmwood Franklin. So we've been working on figuring out, many of you may know that, American society isn't exactly come to terms with the idea that not all of us are Christian. So my daughter, God bless her, had a very interesting, in kindergarten last year, had a very interesting argument with a fellow student who told her that Hanukkah was dumb, and she in turn said, yeah, you think Hanukkah is dumb? Well, Santa Claus is fake. And this, go and argue with the rabbi's kid about Christmas at your own peril.
That's right.
So what we are faced with is a very interesting conundrum, which is in American society where norms tend to be white and Christian. How do we take a place that is filled with people who are mostly white and Christian of some sort and have them understand that the goal is to not be mostly white and Christian, but to be mostly people? And that so that's the underlying backdrop to our conversation today, which we may get to. But I'm going to start, like we do on Crossroads, we like to start with this idea that we are people who have ended up in our professions by heeding some call. And Andy is an observant Catholic in many ways, but I would say you would call yourself more of a spiritual Catholic.
I agree. Yeah, I think so.
And you were that before you were an educator.
Correct. Yeah. So first, let me just say thanks for having me. It's always
please.
Great to spend time with you, Rabbi. And so I was very flattered when you asked me to participate in this. But yeah, so I was raised in a very Catholic family. Very Catholic, weekly Mass. Grandmother went to Mass every day. I went to Catholic schools growing up. My mother was an educator, and it's no surprise that when I finished, I went to Catholic high school, I went to Catholic college.
Where did you go to Catholic college?
I went to Lemoyne College in Syracuse, New York, after going to Canisius High School right here in Buffalo. And so once the Jesuits sort of get a hold of you, it's hard to shake them. And I say that very tongue-in-cheek. I'm a huge fan of the Jesuits and of Jesuit education. And after I ended up graduating from Lemoyne College, I ended up moving down to the Washington, D.C. area to start a career in education. And there's a whole other story of how I came to that, too, because I did not really go to college to become an educator. But ironically, coming from Buffalo, which I consider to be a very Catholic town, and always being around people like me, when I got to D.C., it was the first time that I realized that not everyone's Catholic. And, that's fairly embarrassing for a 22-year-old. But, I ended up working at George Washington University, which is a very secular and large institution, and meeting all kinds of people with all kinds of backgrounds. And it was a tremendous culture shock for me. I went to grad school at GW, which is so much bigger than Lemoyne. to go from being so comfortable all the time to being not necessarily uncomfortable, but in an environment where I met so many people who thought differently than I did, and that continued on for me, and it really was the sort of an important first step in sort of how I got to be a headmaster today at a secular institution after spending my entire most of my about 18 years of my 23 years in private schools as an educator and administrator in Catholic schools. I spent almost all of my time. Elmwood Franklin's the first school in which I've worked that's not Catholic.
So I wonder, we are working on the opposite approach. We are saying, let's help our students cope with discomfort in preschool and grade school and middle school so that they are more comfortable with being uncomfortable, as it were, earlier. And you charted a different course which said, okay, I am comfortable being who I am, knowing who I am, being in an environment where I'm supported in that particular identity, and then I have used that as a jumping off point for encountering discomfort in diversity, knowing that I have a solid background.
Yeah, and also I think all of that being true, one of the core principles of sort of a Jesuit education, even though it's Catholic and it's even though it's Catholic, is being open to growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you take this idea, all your Jesuit slogans, being open to growth, being a man for others, being a man or woman for others, you're taught from a very early age to put others before yourself, and part of that thinking is coming to grips with not everyone thinks the way you think and looks the way you look, and so when you're a child in these homogeneous environments, like I grew up in the city of Tonawanda, went to school in the city of Tonawanda in a Catholic school. When I was at Canisius High School in the very early 90s, I think I graduated in 1991 with, I think there was one African American in my class, and there was some Asian students, and Lemoyne was not that much more diverse, and so you had this conceptual framework of putting others first. You have this conceptual framework of being open to growth, but you've had no practice in it, right? Because you've been surrounded with.
So hold that thought for a second, because I think this is really key. I just want to remind everybody, welcome everyone. If you're just joining us to Crossroads, I'm Rabbi Jonathan Freirich here at Temple Beth Zion in Buffalo, and I'm joined today by Andy Deyell, who is the head of school at Elmwood Franklin, and we're talking, and I think this is a key element for Jewish identity as well, which is there is a lot of particularism in Jewish identity. The chosen people, you can't get more particularistic than that. And my take on that has always been that if we start with building people up in who we are in our particularism, then when we encounter people who are also different than we are, who also have strong beliefs about their particularistic nature, then we say, oh, here is somebody else who believes they're chosen, but they're not us. And we're all in it together and we have to figure out how to get along. And what you're saying to a certain extent is that the Jesuit training emphasizes that I am going to encounter people who disagree with me about either an issue of small Catholic doctrine or an issue of universal thinking and theology, and that person may or may not look like me. And even if I am not putting it into practice, the theory is being applied in smaller ways throughout that particularistic education. Yeah. So are we fancifully believing that we can do that with younger people who may or may not have the pride and confidence in who they are first to encounter somebody else who has pride and confidence in who they are and is different?
I don't think so. I mean, I'd hope not, because I think we learn now in 2019 that kids see difference at a very early age.
Right.
And, I was raised in a generation where talking about difference was seen as rude, so you pushed it down, or you were taught to be colorblind, right? Or you were taught to everyone's equal instead of acknowledging the differences. And I think that has more harm. I think we've seen it has more harm than good. So I think if we know that kids today see difference from a very early age, that we're not giving the small kids in our life the credit they deserve to be able to have conversations around this. We've actually made entire class projects at the 4-year-old level around identity and difference because we've heard kids talking about it. And rather than trying to end that conversation or maybe instructing the kids that that's not polite, we see that as an opportunity.
Well, and obviously I did set that up as a straw man.
Sure.
I send my kids to secular schools and always have. They were in Jewish preschools for some degree of giving them a starting off point among Jewish people, but also because rabbis actually get a discount on preschools that are Jewish in most communities. So that
it doesn't hurt.
Look, preschool's expensive.
That's right.
And so I think we are on to this idea that we can't rely on everyone getting a Jesuit background and going into adulthood saying, oh, I have to take my select background and the privilege that comes with it and leverage it for good in a world where I am not everyone.
And that's not easily learned or applied either. I think, I'm 45 now. My concept of myself and the privilege inherent in being a white straight male is evolved. I mean, and it continues to evolve. I think it's a journey as a head of school. I'm in my 5th year as a head of school, and only through making lots of mistakes, only through lots of uncomfortable experience, because growth generally comes through strain, have I arrived at where I am today. And where I am today is not where I'll be a week or a year or 10 years from now. So I think, right, I have this conceptual framework. I have this gift given to me by my Jesuit education around respect for others. And as in my 20 plus years in adulthood, right? If I'm figuring this out correctly, I'm leaving college, moving to DC, and over the last 23 years, even that has been such a journey, right? It's been such it has been difficult. I mean, I went to grad school a few times. I'm a habitual grad school attender. And for example, I ended up going to Teachers College at Columbia University. And that was, and I did that. I enrolled in this year-long program, took a sabbatical. 2 weeks after I got married, brought my new bride with me to Teachers College, and it was the most uncomfortable I'd ever been.
What was so uncomfortable about teachers?
Well, it was, I figured out pretty quick that in my 30-person cohort, I was the representative of religious schools, and I was a representative who was brought to the cohort to offer a more conservative opinion. And Teachers College is an extremely progressive, liberal place, and not only the workload, which was tremendous, but being thrust in a cohort of 30 people and spending every day with them for 9 months, knowing that in many ways you were there to represent the minority opinion on issues, was a great discomfort. Now, I will also go back.
So you had a Jewish experience.
You could say that, it was also, I would argue, one of the most formative experiences of my life. But in the moment, I didn't see that. And in the moment, I wasn't excited about it. I remember telling my wife, I need to get out of here, right?
So this leads me to some of the spirituality pieces that I think are intrinsic, that you have. Your Catholic spirituality is very much driven by this Jesuit idea. Mm-hmm. And that we might identify this all as, from a Buddhist perspective, as kind of a beginner's mind idea, that we approach everything as a beginner, as not even a novice, but somebody who's barely been initiated into something, and therefore it's all an adventure and a journey. And your approach to discomfort is also been how do I embrace what's being asked of me and see it as a call, not a burden.
Yeah, how do I move from that stage of unconscious incompetence, right? Which is exhilarating at times, but it's like, every step of your professional life, whatever you come into, you start in this phase where you don't know what you don't know, and then how do I move to that unconscious competence phase? And that's a huge journey, and it's a huge, and as a kid, you don't see any excitement in that, and even as a young adult, I think sometimes we think, geez, even as a 45-year-old head, you think you're supposed to know everything, right?
And people come to us thinking that we are supposed to have all the answers.
Right.
And I think, to some extent, our role is to introduce those who think we have answers to a larger world, and that there is, to some extent, what we're trying to overcome is the notion that education is protective. I know that there is a parental hope that we're going to send our kids to the right school, to the right situation, and they are not going to have to encounter discomfort, that they are not going to be bothered, and that they are going to be able to progress and be cultivated and all of these things as if they were a houseplant kept in exactly the right temperature and, sprayed with exactly the right fertilizer and on each leaf attended to without blemish. And what you have just said is, no, there's no growth in that hothouse.
Yeah, I mean, growth comes through strain, and it's very hard, I think, to get parents to understand that, because we have a lot of I think there's a lot of parents who think that being a parent means I'm removing the obstacles from my child's life instead of embracing those obstacles. And raising kids is messy. You have two of them, and raising humans is messy. And but there's a blessing in the skinned knee, and if we don't allow our kids to fall down, fail, get back up, and provide an environment in which they can fail spectacularly, especially early on, then they're not going to be that plant that we're all hoping they grow up to be. That's part of, we can go a million ways with this, but especially at these private institutions like Elmwood Franklin, there is a huge tuition cost to this, and there is, along with this huge tuition cost, is a huge expectation around outcomes. And there are so many variables between paying tuition and getting an outcome, and it's a lot.
Oh, you mean it's not a direct line? Hold on one sec. I just want to let everybody know that, again, this is Crossroads, and I'm Rabbi Jonathan Freirich. I am joined today by Andy Deyell, who is the head of school at Elmwood Franklin here in Buffalo, and we are in fact talking about this challenge of dealing with outcomes. And on the issue of outcomes, right, here we are, high-priced education, right, and recognizing, for all intents and purposes, that there is no such thing as a non-high-priced education right now. Whether it is being paid for by the state or paid for by private people, we have thrown a lot of money at education. And one can look at the fact that spiritually, culturally, educationally, we are facing a crisis in not being able to get outcomes that we are looking for. So parents say, okay, well, Elmwood Franklin School, I have enough money to send my kids there. Therefore, I need to be guaranteed a best outcome.
Sure. It's a massive sacrifice, right, for our families, and for any family that's in a private school. Whether it be a Catholic school or a secular school or a Jewish school. I think there's a great sacrifice that families make, knowing that education is the path to a better life, and you want the return on your investment. You want to know that there's value in what you're spending. You want to know that the outcome will be there at the end of the day. And generally, in our schools, independent schools and private schools, the outcome is there. but it's not always a straight line up, right? There's a lot of bumps and bruises along the way.
Well, and again, we're talking about outcomes in people.
Right.
And
academic outcomes, as well as social and emotional outcomes, as well as preparedness outcomes.
And we're attempting to apply a metric, a numerical metric, to the image of the divine. Right? If we are going to treat each other and treat our children as miraculously unique expressions of a deep sense of the infinite in which we will never be able to comprehend it all, then the whole attempt to assess and rely on assessment is a very, very narrow bridge towards difficulty because, look, as a parent, I want to encourage, especially my son, to be the person and the young man that he wants to be, not to be in my image. And yet, man to man, father to son, you know that the way that we encourage our sons to do better often comes off more as shaming and discouragement and poking fun at and picking on flaws to try to emphasize overcoming those flaws, and none of that is recognizing the infinite within them. On the other hand, we don't want to give too much license either.
Right. Yeah. It's finding that balance, right? That's what most parents are looking as they're raising children, to find the balance between being authoritative and sort of setting the correct parameters, but also the right amount of nurture and comfort to help them grow.
And then you are in the uncomfortable position, speaking of discomfort, of being paid to provide that partnership with parents who sometimes, let's be honest, not all parents are interested in this degree of reflection on their roles, nor do they feel in paying a high price for a product that they need to participate in the partnership of the creation of that outcome either. How do you cope on a day-to-day basis with the spiritual, intellectual, emotional disconnect with people who say, how come you are not doing X, Y, or Z for my child?
Well, people go back to what they know the best, right? In times of crisis. So I rely on, we had this conversation early in the car ride over here. I rely on that background as a Catholic, as a Jesuit trained person, to put myself in the other person's shoes, try to understand, empathize, sympathize with what they want, mirror their concern, but also at the same time provide the guidance the best I can. And it's not easy. I think I would not want to say that what I do is, I love our parents. I've worked at numerous schools.
I love our parents too. Don't get me wrong.
I've loved the parents, at all the schools in which I worked. And because at the end of the day, what you have to keep reminding yourself is that's their child, that's their main priority. And they really want what's best for their child. And if you can continually remind yourself in some of the more strenuous times that's what parents are after, that they just want what's best for their kid. And even if they, you're not just an educator for the children, you're at times an educator for the parents. And I find most of the parents, that partnership is there. They understand what they're buying into when they buy into an independent school. They understand what they're buying into when they buy into a private school. What makes it tricky, I think, at Elmwood, I shouldn't say what makes it tricky at Elmwood. I should, because it's really what makes it tricky for me is the lack of that religious anchor. Working in a secular institution as a practicing Catholic, or almost practicing Catholic.
You call yourself practicing. We're not going to argue.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. But it can be a challenge, and it's been a slow realization for me to come to grips with that, because when I was interviewed that question came up numerous times. I mean, it doesn't take long to look at my resume and realize that I'm a Catholic school educator. And here I was coming back to Buffalo and working in one of the few independent schools. And every constituency group that interviewed me asked me about that. What is it going to be like to be a Catholic and not at a Catholic school? What's it going to be like to always work at Catholic schools? Is this going to be a problem for you? And I was, adamant that it would not be. That it was, many of the principles and themes, treating each other well, treating other people like you want them to be treated, thinking beyond yourself. Those are sort of universal precepts for all religions. But in actuality, it's been, if I'm being, as I've evolved in the role and now being 5 years into it, it's been a real struggle for me. It's been a drain on my energy and my thinking and morale. But I think finally acknowledging that has been difficult for me, that I'm used to this anchor for an institution, this moral compass that's always been built in. And now, being at a secular institution, you have to drop those anchors, and you have to find ways to anchor the institution in a lot of these concepts. They're not just there for you. You have to be super intentional about creating those anchors, and also being careful not to make your anchor, your personal anchor, the institution's anchor. So it's been a real interesting, I would say, journey.
Well, and I want to acknowledge that the strength of that journey for Elmwood Franklin on your account. That is to say that the consciousness of needing a values-driven idea for a school, that we need big strategic goals on the one hand, and we need day-to-day application of the values of achieving those goals on the other. And your combination of rigor in terms of saying, look, we have no bones about the fact that academic excellence is part of is our goal, and nonetheless saying, in order to achieve that, we need to be people of integrity. We need to be people of compassion. We need to be people of kindness. We need to be people who care for each other. We need to have a parents' community that is interconnected and knows each other and wants to spend time with each other, because we want them to want their kids to progress and understand that it's not just what happens in the classroom. These things are at the core of an educational system that requires us, we are giving over our kids to strangers initially for the majority of their lives. And if we are not going to figure out a way to have that partnership guided by the highest of our ideals. Now, your highest ideals were learned in a Catholic setting. They are in no way contradictory with my highest ideals learned in a secular and Jewish setting, and multiple settings. In fact, what we've found is that complementary nature is what makes an independent secular school like Elmwood Franklin particularly amazing, because our kids are benefiting from, your kids coming over and sharing a Passover Seder with the rabbi's kids. And my
Thank you for that, by the way.
Please. And my kids going in and figuring out how to be a Jewish ambassador, how to code switch and say, oh, this person doesn't get where I come from. It's not that they're dumb. It's not that they're oppressive. It's not that they're tyrannical. It's that I am here, and I'm the only one they may have yet to encounter who might be able to help them figure this out. And
I find kids rise to the occasion oftentimes as you give them, and I have many thoughts about sort of what we were just saying, and I'll bring this back to the mission of our school in a second. But one of the ironically, one of the most interesting and fun times I had as a teacher, as I went through my career, was teaching a world religions course at a Catholic school. And how the kids, watching the children who are Catholic, overwhelmingly, make connections to these other religions and see the threads that bind these religions together, but also to notice and appreciate the differences. And so that type of exposure is key. Right? Even in a religious school. We are going to actually
stop there, if you can imagine, on this idea that on this Sunday that Catholics and Jews and Muslims and Baha'i and Buddhists can come together in any environment and find common ground and see that what's unique about us is our contribution of values that we can share. Andy, it's been amazing having you on. Again, this is Andy Deyell, the head of school at Elmwood Franklin here in Buffalo, talking with me. I'm Rabbi Jonathan Freirich, the rabbi at Temple Beth Zion, and we wish all of you a Sunday filled with blessings of conversation and discussion and learning, and hopefully an encounter with someone you haven't met that leaves you knowing more about them and the universe. Have a wonderful Sunday.